Stamford, Connecticut, gleamed under the spring sun, with its tree-lined streets and the bustle of the commercial district. The city, just a few miles from New York, blended coastal charm with the sophistication of its proximity to the metropolis. At the heart of the Stamford town center, a mall of gleaming storefronts, Anne Sullivan, 25 years old, adjusted a haute couture dress in the window of La Belle Boutique, where she worked as a saleswoman. Her brown hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and her green eyes observed each customer with a mix of professional courtesy and restrained envy. Anne was skilled at customer service with a smile that won over even the most demanding clients, but inside, she dreamed of the day she would walk into the store with a designer bag and a limitless credit card, not just the clerk behind the counter. Anne had grown up in a modest neighborhood in Stamford where her parents, a high school teacher and a nurse, always struggled to pay the bills. Since her teenage years, she flipped through fashion magazines and watched shows about the lives of the rich and famous, fueling her ambition to climb the social ladder. Her saleswoman's salary covered the expenses of her rented apartment in Springdale, but not the dreams of living in a skyscraper with a view of Central Park or strutting at gala events. Each day at the store was a reminder of what she wanted to achieve but didn't yet have. A few blocks away, in a modern office building with mirrored windows, Ryan Mitchell, 28 years old, analyzed data at his workstation at Tech Trend Innovations, a software company developing solutions for major corporations. Ryan was tall, with tousled blonde hair and thin-framed glasses, balancing competence with a humility that made him well-liked by colleagues. His analyst salary was solid, enough for a cozy apartment in the Harbor Point neighborhood and occasional dinners at restaurants like the Cask Republic. But above all, Ryan was passionately in love with Anne Sullivan, his girlfriend of 1 year. He had met her at a networking event in Stamford downtown, where he saw her talking to executives with a confidence that left him enchanted. Since then, he did everything to make her smile. That evening, Ryan waited for Anne outside the store, holding a to-go coffee from the local Starbucks. The orange sky reflected on the Long Island Sound, visible in the background, as the couple walked through Stamford downtown, an area full of bars, restaurants, and charming shops. Anne, with her simple but elegant purse, smiled beside Ryan, but her thoughts wandered. "Have you ever thought about living in New York?" she asked casually, as they passed a brightly lit storefront with sparkling jewelry. Ryan laughed, thinking it was just small talk. "Maybe one day, but I like it here. It's peaceful and we have everything we need, don't we?" Anne nodded, but her eyes fixed on a jewelry store poster where a diamond necklace gleamed under the light. "Yeah," she murmured, without conviction. On weekends, the couple had a routine Ryan loved. They had picnics at Cummings Park with a view of the sea, or spent evenings at his apartment, watching romantic comedies while Anne nestled into his shoulder. Ryan planned their future: a bigger house, maybe kids, a stable life together. One night, as he prepared pasta with homemade sauce, a recipe he'd learned from his mother, he served the dish with a shy smile. "You're perfect, you know," Anne said, laughing as she picked up her fork, but even in those moments she felt an emptiness. Ryan's love was warm, genuine, but it didn't shine like the dreams she'd carried since childhood. At the store, Anne served clients who arrived in luxury cars, flaunting expensive watches and bags from brands she only saw in the windows. Each interaction was a reminder of what she wanted to achieve. One client, a middle-aged woman with emerald earrings, left her particularly restless when she mentioned a party at a mansion in Greenwich, where only the right people were invited. Anne smiled, taking the order, but inside, she pictured herself at such a place being the center of attention. One day, she thought as she folded a cashmere scarf for the client. These interactions fed her ambition, making her question whether life with Ryan, as comfortable as it was truly enough. Ryan, unaware of Anne's restlessness, continued to surprise her with small gestures: a flower plucked from a public garden, tickets to a show at the Palace Theater, or sweet messages during the day. "Have you ever thought about our next step?" he asked one night as they walked through Cove Island Park with the sound of waves crashing in the background. Anne hesitated, forcing a smile. "We've got time, right?" she replied, looking away toward the horizon. Ryan didn't press, but he held the question in his heart. believing their love would overcome any doubts. He hugged her, feeling the cool sea breeze, while Anne, even in his arms, seemed distant, lost in thoughts of a grander future. At the Yao store, Anne watched each wealthy client with a mix of admiration and envy. She knew her charm and intelligence could take her further, but she felt trapped in Stamford, in a cycle of sales and routine. The city, with its modest skyscrapers, quiet parks, and the breeze from the Long Island Sound felt too small for her dreams. Every gleaming storefront, every client with a platinum credit card, was a reminder of what she wanted to achieve. Anne was good at what she did. She knew how to sell, how to charm, but it wasn't enough. She wanted to be the protagonist of her own story, not a supporting character in the lives of others. That night, after closing the store, Anne returned to her small apartment in Springdale. The building, with white walls and simple furniture, was functional but lacked the glamour she craved. She flopped onto her bed, staring at the ceiling, where a thin crack seemed to mock her aspirations. On the nightstand, a photo of her with Ryan, taken at a picnic in Cummings Park, showed them smiling with the sea in the background. Ryan, with his arm around her, looked so happy. Anne picked up the photo, tracing the outline of his face with her finger, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The lights of New York, gala parties, expensive dresses, everything seemed so close yet so out of reach. She closed her eyes, imagining herself in a world where she was the star, where no one saw her as just a saleswoman. The ambition, which had grown silently for years, now pulsed stronger, whispering that Ryan's love, as true as it was, wasn't enough for the dreams she carried. Spring in Stamford, Connecticut, continued to color the city with shades of green and the sparkle of the Long Island Sound in the background. At the Stamford town center, the pace at La Belle Boutique was intense, with clients coming and going, their designer bags swinging like trophies. Anne Sullivan behind the counter was arranging a shelf of silk scarves, but her mind was elsewhere. The sales routine, though lucrative, felt more and more like a chain tying her to a life she didn't want. Her green eyes, always attentive, caught every detail of the wealthy clients, the gleaming watches, the impeccable leather shoes, the conversations about vacations in the Hamptons or dinners in Manhattan. She wanted that, not just to sell, but to live that reality. That morning, while adjusting a mannequin with a gala dress, the store's door opened and a man entered with the confidence of someone who knows the world waits for him. Samuel Brooks, 40 years old, was the kind of man who drew attention effortlessly. Tall, with neatly trimmed gray hair and a tailored navy blue suit, he exuded power and wealth. His brown eyes scanned the store before settling on Anne, who instinctively straightened her posture and offered her best smile. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you with something special?" she asked, her voice sweet but calculated. Samuel raised an eyebrow, amused. "I need a birthday gift for a friend. Something elegant but not extravagant. You seem to know what you're doing." Anne guided him to a display of fine jewelry, suggesting a pair of pearl earrings with gold details. As they talked, she noticed the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, the kind of piece that cost more than she earned in a year. Samuel was the CEO of a jewelry chain based in New York, Brooks & Brilliance, famous for adorning celebrities and socialites. He mentioned casually that he was in Stamford only for a day, for his friend's birthday party, who lived in Greenwich, a nearby town known for its mansions and affluent elite. Anne listened intently, absorbing every word, while her mind painted scenes of glamour. The conversation flowed easily. Samuel was charismatic, with a dry humor that made her laugh, and Anne used all her charm, leaning slightly forward, laughing at the right moments. "You seem more interesting than the average saleswoman," he said with a smile that was both a compliment and a challenge. Anne felt her heart race. This was the opening she'd been waiting for, a chance to get closer to the world she always wanted. When Samuel chose the earrings and paid with a gleaming black card, he looked her in the eyes. "I'm hosting my friend's birthday party tomorrow at a mansion in Greenwich. You should come. It's the kind of event someone like you would appreciate." Anne hesitated for a millisecond, thinking of Ryan, but the image of a mansion full of influential people erased any doubt. "I'd love to," she replied with a smile that hid the storm in her mind. That night, Anne returned to her apartment in Springdale, her heart pounding with the prospect of the party. She needed to throw Ryan off, who had already suggested dinner at Barcelona Wine Bar the next day. Sitting on the couch, phone in hand, she typed a message. "Babe, I'm feeling sick. I think I'll stay home tomorrow. I need to rest." Ryan replied almost immediately, worried, offering to bring soup or spend the evening with her. "No need, I'll just sleep early. I'll call you tomorrow," Anne wrote, feeling a pang of guilt, quickly stifled by excitement. She opened her closet, searching for something that could impress at the party. She chose a fitted black dress, bought on sale at the store, and heels that, though not designer, looked expensive enough. Looking in the mirror, she imagined herself entering the mansion, with all eyes on her. The next day, Anne took an Uber to Greenwich, a town that seemed to belong to another world, with its immaculate streets and houses that looked more like castles. The mansion, perched on a hill overlooking the Long Island Sound, was even more impressive than she'd imagined. The garden was decorated with white lights, and a marble fountain bubbled in the center. Luxury cars, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces crowded the entrance, while guests in gala attire chatted animatedly. Samuel met her at the entrance, impeccable in a tuxedo, and introduced her as Anne, a special friend from Stamford. She felt a chill down her spine, but also a surge of pride. For the first time, she was where she always wanted to be. The party was a spectacle. Tables covered in white linen displayed trays of sophisticated canapes, and a string quartet played in the background. Anne held a glass of champagne, observing the guests. A real estate magnate, a former model who now ran a gallery in Manhattan, a couple who had just returned from a season in Paris. Samuel guided her through the room, introducing her to people whose names she recognized from magazines or social media. "Anne works in fashion in Stamford, but I'm sure she's destined for bigger things," he said to a group with a smile that made her blush. She laughed, chatted, and for the first time in a long time felt in the right place. Every compliment, every admiring glance, fed her ambition. She wanted more of this, much more. While dancing with Samuel on a floor lit by crystal chandeliers, Anne completely forgot about Ryan. The guilt she felt for lying to him evaporated in the heat of the night. Samuel was everything she had dreamed of: rich, powerful, connected. He told stories about dinners in New York, trips to Dubai, events with celebrities. "Have you ever been to Manhattan?" he asked as they swayed slowly. "A few times, but never like this," Anne replied, her eyes gleaming. The night ended with Samuel driving her back to Stamford in his black Porsche, the engine purring softly through the Greenwich streets. At her building's door, he held her hand for a moment longer. "You're different, Anne. I want to see you again. Tomorrow, at Lorca Coffee Bar, at 3. Anne nodded, her heart racing, without mentioning Ryan or the one-year relationship that still existed. Back in her apartment, Anne flopped onto the bed, still in the party dress. The photo of Ryan on the nightstand seemed to watch her, but she turned it face down, unable to face his gaze. Her mind was in Greenwich, in the mansion, with the people she'd met, with Samuel. For the first time, she felt the world of her dreams was within reach. But somewhere in her conscience, a voice whispered that she was crossing a line from which there might be no return. Anne ignored it, closing her eyes and imagining the lights of New York, where she believed her true life was about to begin. The morning in Stamford, Connecticut, dawned with a clear sky, the sun reflecting off the storefronts of the Stamford town center and the calm waters of the Long Island Sound in the distance. Anne Sullivan, still buzzing from the Greenwich party, woke up in her small Springdale apartment with a mix of euphoria and nervousness. The black dress she had worn the previous night still hung on the bedroom door, a reminder of the glamorous life she had tasted for a few hours. But now, the focus was on the meeting with Samuel Brooks at Lorca Coffee Bar, scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. His invitation to see her again, made as he dropped her off at her building, felt like the key to a world she had always craved. Yet, The photo of Ryan Mitchell on her nightstand, turned face down, was an uncomfortable reminder of the relationship she hadn't yet ended. Anne spent the morning restless, torn between excitement for the meeting and guilt for continuing to lie to Ryan. He had sent another message, asking how she was feeling after the supposed illness that led her to cancel their dinner at Barcelona Wine Bar. "Better, but I'm still going to take it easy today. I'll call you later," she replied, the words coming with an ease that surprised her. Each message to Ryan seemed to dig a deeper hole, but Anne smothered the guilt with visions of New York. Skyscrapers, exclusive parties, a life where she wouldn't just be a store clerk. She opened her closet, choosing an outfit that exuded effortless sophistication. A black pencil skirt, a cream silk blouse, and heels that, while not designer, looked elegant enough. Looking in the mirror, she adjusted her brown hair into loose waves, rehearsing the smile she would use with Samuel. Lorca Coffee Bar, in the heart of Stamford downtown, was a popular meeting spot, with its rustic wooden tables and the aroma of freshly roasted coffee filling the air. Anne arrived a few minutes early, choosing a corner table near a window overlooking Bedford Street, where pedestrians passed by carrying shopping bags and to-go coffee cups. The place was bustling, with the murmur of conversations and the sound of laptop keyboards, but Anne barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for Samuel. When he walked in exactly at 3, her heart raced. He was more casual than the night before, wearing an open-collared blue dress shirt and sunglasses perched on his head, but he still exuded an aura of power. His smile, upon seeing her, was both warm and calculated. "You got here early. I like that," Samuel said, sitting across from her. He ordered an espresso, while Anne chose a latte, her hands fidgeting nervously with her purse strap as the waiter walked away. "So, how was the night for you?" he asked, leaning back in his chair with a confidence that both intimidated and attracted her. Anne smiled, choosing her words carefully. "Unforgettable. I've never been somewhere like that, with such interesting people." Samuel laughed, a low, almost condescending sound. "That's my world, Anne, but it's just the beginning. You seem like someone who could fit into it." The conversation flowed easily, as it had in the store, but now there was a greater tension. Samuel spoke of New York with a passion that captivated her. Dinners at Le Bernardin, Broadway theater premieres, rooftop parties overlooking the Hudson. He described his life as CEO of Brooks and Brilliance with a mix of pride and disdain, as if success was inevitable, but also a burden. Anne listened, soaking up every word, picturing herself by his side in one of those settings. "Have you ever thought about leaving Stamford?" he asked suddenly, his brown eyes locked on hers. Anne hesitated, feeling the weight of the question. "Always. Stamford is too small for what I want," she replied, with an honesty that surprised her. Samuel leaned forward, his voice lower, almost conspiratorial. "Then come with me to New York. I live in the Upper East Side in an apartment you'd love. We can explore the city together, and I think you have what it takes to shine there." The proposal hit Anne like a wave. New York, the Upper East Side. An apartment she could only imagine from decor magazines. It was everything she had dreamed of, offered directly, no strings attached. Her heart pounded, and before she could think of the consequences, the words slipped out. "Yes, I want to." Samuel smiled, satisfied, as if he knew she wouldn't refuse. "Great. We'll sort out the details in the next few days. You won't regret it, Anne." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Samuel talked about the next steps, mentioning he'd help her move, that he'd introduce her to important people. Anne nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere. She pictured herself walking down Fifth Avenue, entering exclusive events, being someone. When Samuel said goodbye with a handshake that lingered a second longer, she felt a surge of adrenaline. But as she returned to her apartment, reality began to creep in. Ryan, the one-year relationship. She knew she had to end it, but the idea of confronting him filled her with a mix of fear and pragmatism. Maybe, she thought, she could keep Ryan as a safety net, in case New York wasn't what she expected. Sitting on the couch, Anne looked out the window where Stamford's lights twinkled softly. The photo of Ryan, still turned down on the nightstand, felt like a weight she didn't want to carry. She needed a plan. She would tell Ryan she was going to New York to find herself, that she needed time. Nothing about Samuel. Nothing about the truth. It was a lie that would protect her, that would keep the door ajar in case things didn't work out. As she planned the words she'd use, Anne felt a pang of guilt but pushed it to the back of her mind. New York was calling, with its promises of glamour and power. She was one step away from crossing the threshold to the life she always wanted, and nothing, not even Ryan's love, would make her hesitate now. The afternoon sun filtered through the thin curtains of Anne Sullivan's apartment in Springdale, Stamford, casting soft shadows on the worn wooden floor. The small space, with its simple furniture and white walls, felt more claustrophobic than ever. Anne, sitting on the couch, clutched her phone tightly, rereading the message she had sent to Ryan Mitchell minutes earlier. "Can we talk today? Come by my place at 6. Her heart was racing, not from nervousness about the conversation to come, but from the decision she had already made. New York, Samuel Brooks's invitation, the promise of a glamorous life, all of it outweighed the one-year relationship with Ryan. Still, she needed to keep up appearances, to leave a door slightly ajar in case things with Samuel didn't go as planned. Anne spent the day restless, tidying the apartment almost mechanically. She tucked away the photo of her and Ryan, taken at a picnic in Cummings Park, into a drawer, unable to face his smile. She chose a simple outfit, jeans and a gray blouse, so as not to seem like she was trying too hard. She wanted the conversation to be quick, with no room for emotions that might make her waver. While cleaning the coffee table, her mind rehearsed the words she would say. She needed time, that New York was a chance to find herself. Nothing about Samuel. Nothing that would reveal the truth. The lie was a safety net, a way to keep Ryan as a fallback plan in case the big city let her down. At 6 on the dot, the doorbell rang. Anne took a deep breath, smoothing her blouse before opening the door. Ryan was there, in his worn leather jacket and with a worried look that sent a pang of guilt through her. His blonde hair was slightly tousled, and he held a paper bag from Zodi's 19th Hole, a local restaurant they loved. "I brought a snack in case you haven't eaten," he said with a shy smile. "How are you feeling?" Anne forced a smile, gesturing for him to come in. "Better, thanks. We need to talk." Her voice wavered for a moment, but she steadied herself, pointing to the couch. Ryan sat down, the bag still in his hand, his face marked by a mix of confusion and concern. Anne stood for a moment, as if the physical distance could shield her from what was coming. "Ryan, I'm thinking about moving to New York," she began, the words coming out rehearsed but fragile. "It's a chance to try something new, to find myself, you know. I think I need some time." Ryan furrowed his brow, leaning forward. "Moving to New York? Just like that?" he asked, his voice heavy with surprise. "Anne, we never talked about this. What's going on?" Anne looked away, fixing her gaze on the window where Stamford's lights were starting to come on. "It's not just like that. I've always wanted something bigger, you know. Stamford is small. I feel like I'm stuck in the same place." She crossed her arms, trying to seem resolute. Ryan shook his head as if trying to process. "And us? What happens to us?" he asked, his voice now softer, almost pleading. Anne swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the words she needed to say. "I think we need a break. It's not you, Ryan, it's me. I need to figure out what I want." The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the distant sound of a car passing on the street. Ryan lowered his eyes to his hands, still holding the bag, as if searching for something to hold on to. "Anne, I love you. You know that, right? I'd do anything for you," he said, his voice breaking. "If it's New York you want, we can plan that together. It doesn't have to be like this." His words cut through Anne like a knife, but she held firm. the image of Samuel and his promise of a life in the Upper East Side burning in her mind. "No, Ryan. I need to do this alone," she replied, with a coldness that surprised her. Ryan stood up, his eyes glistening with tears he was trying to hold back. "So that's it? A year together and you just leave?" he asked, his voice faltering. Anne looked at him, her heart tightening, but her ambition was stronger. "It's not forever, just for now," she said, knowing the vagueness was a calculated lie. She wanted to keep Ryan as a possibility, a way back if New York wasn't what she expected. Ryan shook his head as if trying to understand something that didn't make sense. "You're not being honest, Anne. I can feel it," he said, before walking to the door. He paused for a moment, his hand on the doorknob, and looked at her one last time. "I really loved you. I hope you find what you're looking for," he said, his voice now a whisper. Anne didn't respond, just stood there, arms crossed as he left. The door closed with a soft click, but the sound echoed like thunder in her mind. Alone, Anne sat on the couch, the untouched food bag on the coffee table. She expected to feel relief, but what came was an emptiness she couldn't explain. She picked up her phone and opened a message from Samuel, confirming he would send details about the move soon. The promise of New York pulled her like a current, but the image of Ryan with tears in his eyes lingered in her mind. Anne got up and went to the window, looking out at Stamford's lights. The city, with its quiet streets and modest buildings, felt small and distant, as if it already belonged to another life. She thought of Samuel's apartment in the Upper East Side, the parties, the people he promised to introduce her to. It was everything she had ever wanted, or at least, it was what she believed. But as she looked at the horizon, a small part of her wondered if she was leaving behind something more valuable than she realized. Anne pushed the thought away, focusing on the future. New York was just a few days away, and she wouldn't look back. Not now. With a sigh, she returned to the couch, picked up the bag Ryan had left and put it in the fridge, as if she could also store away the guilt that was starting to grow. The lights of New York twinkled like fallen stars, reflected in the skyscraper surrounding Samuel Brooks' apartment in the Upper East Side. Anne Sullivan, now settled in a world that once existed only in her fantasies, gazed at the city from the 30th floor window, where Manhattan's skyline stretched out in a promise of possibilities. Samuel's apartment was everything she had imagined, spacious with polished hardwood floors, modern designer furniture, and a view that captured Central Park in the distance. But just a week after moving from Stamford, Connecticut, reality was starting to reveal itself as far different from the dream that had brought her here. Anne had left her modest Springdale apartment with a suitcase full of clothes and expectations. The move had been swift, arranged by Samuel with an almost cold efficiency. He had settled her into his apartment, a space that looked like it came straight out of an architecture magazine, with white walls adorned with abstract paintings and a stainless steel kitchen she rarely used. In the first few days, Anne was ecstatic. She walked the streets of the Upper East Side, passing designer boutiques on Madison Avenue and chic cafes where socialites sipped cappuccinos. She imagined herself as part of that world, a sophisticated woman, far from the store clerk she had been in Stamford. But the initial excitement soon gave way to a sense of unease she couldn't ignore. Samuel, who had seemed so charismatic at the Greenwich party and the Lorca coffee bar meeting, now appeared distant. He spent long hours away, at meetings at Brooks and Brilliant's headquarters or social events Anne was rarely invited to. When they were together, he treated her with a cold courtesy, as if she were a temporary guest, not a partner. "Tidy up those boxes in the living room, please," he said one morning, pointing to a pile of papers and personal items without even looking up from his phone. Anne, surprised, complied, but the task made her feel more like a maid than the woman he had promised to introduce to his world. Samuel's promises, of taking her to parties, introducing her to important people, weren't materializing as she had expected. On one of the rare occasions he took her to an event, a charity dinner at the Metropolitan Club, Anne felt like an accessory, Samuel introduced her to a few acquaintances but soon drifted off to talk with other CEOs and investors, leaving her alone with a glass of wine and a forced smile. The women at the event, in their designer dresses and sparkling jewelry, looked at her with subtle disdain, as if they knew she didn't belong in that world. "You're from Stamford, aren't you?" one of them asked, with a tone that mixed curiosity and superiority. Anne nodded, feeling her face burn, and replied vaguely, "Yes, but now I'm here." At home, the dynamic wasn't any better. Samuel asked her to organize his closet, do grocery shopping, or clean up the mess he left after meetings at home. "You have good taste, Anne. I trust you to keep things in order," he said with a smile that felt more like an order than a compliment. Anne, eager to please him, complied, but each task made her feel smaller. One night, while folding his shirts, she found a receipt from a midtown restaurant, dated for a day he had said he was in a meeting. The receipt, for a dinner for two, sparked a flicker of suspicion. Anne tried to ignore it, but the seed of doubt was planted. New York streets, which had once seemed full of promise, began to feel oppressive. Anne walked through Central Park, trying to recapture the excitement of the early days, but loneliness followed her. She spent hours alone in the apartment, staring out the window while Samuel went out to commitments he never explained. One of those nights, while he was out, Anne opened a bottle of red wine she found in the cellar and sat on the leather couch, trying to convince herself that this life was still worth it. But memories of Stamford started to surface, unbidden. She remembered Ryan, the picnics at Cummings Park, the simple nights when he made her laugh with silly stories. She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. "This is what I want," she murmured to herself, but the words sounded hollow. One morning, while Samuel sipped coffee in the kitchen, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Have you thought about getting a job here? Maybe something in a store like in Stamford," he suggested casually. Anne felt a pang in her chest. "I thought you wanted me to be part of your world," she replied hesitantly. Samuel laughed, a dry sound that made her shrink. "You're adorable, Anne, but this world takes more than charm. You need to adapt." The words were like a slap, and Anne realized with a shock that Samuel saw her as an outsider, someone who needed to adapt to deserve being there. As the days passed, Anne began to see that Samuel wasn't the man she had imagined. He was charismatic when he wanted to be, but also cold, controlling, and, worse, seemed to have no intention of truly including her in his life. She found messages on his phone, left carelessly on the table, suggesting meetings with other women, a model in Soho, an executive in Tribeca. Confronting him seemed pointless. Samuel held the power, and she, after all, was just the girl from Stamford he had decided to bring to New York. The city, with its relentless pace and skyscrapers that seemed to judge, began to suffocate her. One night, alone in the apartment, Anne sat on the floor, her back against the window, looking at the distant glow of the city. She thought of Ryan, of how he looked at her with a tenderness Samuel had never shown. She picked up her phone, hesitating to open Ryan's old messages, but stopped. She couldn't go back, not now. Still, the doubt grew. New York was everything she had dreamed of, but at what cost? The guilt for leaving Ryan, mixed with the disillusionment of her life with Samuel, formed a weight she couldn't ignore. As Manhattan's lights twinkled outside, Anne felt for the first time that she might have traded something real for an illusion that was starting to crumble. A year had passed since Anne Sullivan left Stamford, Connecticut, to live with Samuel Brooks in his Upper East Side apartment in New York. The city, with its gleaming skyscrapers and relentless pace, no longer seemed like the paradise Anne had imagined. What was once a dream of glamour had become a routine of loneliness and disillusionment. Samuel's apartment, with its panoramic windows and designer furniture, felt more like a gilded prison than a home. Anne, sitting on a stool in the kitchen, stared at a cup of coffee that was slowly going cold, while the distant sound of taxis echoed along Madison Avenue. The reality of her new life weighed on her like a shadow she couldn't shake. Samuel remained a sporadic presence, showing up at the apartment only to change clothes or issue orders. He treated her with a coldness that had intensified over time, his words often laced with condescension. "You need to try harder to fit in, Anne," he had said once, while flipping through a business magazine. "This world isn't for just anyone." The words cut deep, reinforcing the feeling that Anne was an intruder, a girl from Stamford trying to play at being a socialite. He rarely took her to events anymore, and when he did, it was to show her off briefly before abandoning her in a corner, while he talked with people Anne would never truly know. The few times Anne accompanied Samuel to social events like a charity, gala at the Plaza Hotel, or a cocktail party on a midtown rooftop, she felt more like a trophy than a companion. One night at the Plaza, Anne stood alone at a table holding a glass of champagne, while Samuel laughed with a group of investors. A middle-aged woman in a couture dress and a diamond necklace approached and asked, with a cold smile, "You're Samuel's new companion, aren't you? He always brings someone new." Anne forced a smile, mumbling something about being a friend, but the humiliation burned. She realized that to those people she was nothing more than a fleeting figure in Samuel's orbit. Her suspicions about other women in Samuel's life were confirmed over time. Anne found clues: a strange perfume on one of his jackets, messages on his phone he didn't bother to hide. One night while Samuel was in the shower, she saw a notification on his phone. A message from someone named Clara mentioning a dinner in Soho. Anne's stomach churned, but she said nothing. Confronting him seemed pointless. Samuel held all the power in the relationship, and she depended on him for everything. From the roof over her head to the clothes she wore, bought with his credit card. The independence Anne had imagined when she left Stamford had vanished, replaced by a dependence that shamed her. To fill the void, Anne tried to find her place in New York. She enrolled in a fashion design course at a school in the Flatiron district, using the money she had managed to save in Stamford. But the classes, though inspiring, only highlighted how far she was from her dreams. Her classmates, many of them younger and with industry connections, talked about internships at major brands, while Anne felt stuck with no contacts or prospects. She also tried to find a job, sending resumes to luxury stores on Fifth Avenue, but the rejections piled up. "You don't have enough experience for this level," read one standard response. Anne began to wonder if Samuel was right. Maybe she wasn't made for this world. The nights in the apartment were the worst. Alone, Anne sat on the couch, staring out the window as Manhattan's lights twinkled indifferently. She thought of Ryan more and more, not with romantic longing, but with a painful nostalgia for the simplicity she had left behind. She picked up her phone several times, tempted to send a message, but always stopped. What would she say? That she had traded his love for an illusion? That she was trapped in a life she hated? Guilt consumed her, but pride kept her from admitting her mistake. Instead, she sank into bottles of wine, trying to silence the thoughts that tormented her. One night, Samuel came home late, his suit wrinkled and his breath smelling of whiskey. He tossed his keys on the table and looked at Anne, who was reading a book in the living room. "Have you ever thought about going back to Stamford?" he asked bluntly. Anne froze, the book falling to her lap. "What?" she asked, her voice trembling. Samuel shrugged as if the question were trivial. "You don't seem happy here. Maybe New York isn't for you." The words were a blow, confirming what Anne had feared. Samuel was tired of her. She was disposable like the women who came before and those who would come after. "And you? Are you happy with me?" she shot back with a courage she didn't know she had. Samuel laughed, a cruel sound. "Don't be dramatic, Anne. You wanted New York, and here you are. What more did you expect?" After he went to bed, Anne stayed awake, sitting on the cold living room floor. The city lights, which had once enchanted her, now seemed mocking. She realized she needed to make a decision. Staying with Samuel meant continuing to live on the fringes of his world, a shadow of the person she had dreamed of being. But leaving New York would mean admitting defeat, returning to Stamford with nothing but regrets. She thought of Ryan, wondering if he was still there, if he would accept her after everything. The idea of going back was tempting, but also terrifying. It would be like erasing the last year of her life. As the hours passed, Anne felt a painful clarity. She needed to find a way out. The lights of Manhattan glowed coldly as Anne Sullivan packed her suitcase in Samuel Brooks' Upper East Side apartment. After a year in New York, the dream of glamour that had driven her to leave Stamford, Connecticut, had crumbled into disillusionment. Samuel, with his coldness, betrayals, and disdain, had made life by his side unbearable. The city, once promising glittering parties and a place among the elite, now suffocated her with its indifference. Anne, still driven by the ambition that defined her, decided that returning to Stamford was not surrender but a calculated move. Ryan Mitchell, the boyfriend she had discarded as a burden, was her backup plan. Someone who, in her mind, would take her back without hesitation. As she folded her clothes, bought with Samuel's credit card, Anne planned her exit, determined to make it clear she was leaving on her own terms. That morning, Samuel was in the living room, reviewing Brooks and Brilliant's papers, when Anne approached, her suitcase ready by the door. "Samuel, I'm leaving," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. He looked up, surprised but emotionless. "Leaving? To where?" he asked, as if the idea were a minor inconvenience. Anne crossed her arms, holding her ground. "I'm going back to Stamford. New York isn't what I expected, and you know it." Samuel laughed, a dry sound that echoed in the apartment. "You thought it would be easy, Anne. This world eats people like you. Good luck in Stamford." The words stung, but she refused to back down. "I don't need your luck," she shot back, grabbing her suitcase and walking out without waiting for a response. The door closed with a snap, sealing the end of a dream that was never real. At Penn Station, Anne bought a ticket to Stamford, the noise of trains and the crowd enveloping her like a reminder of the city that had rejected her. Sitting on the train, looking out the window as Manhattan faded behind, she felt the shattering of her dreams like a physical weight. She had imagined herself at fashion shows, dinners at Le Bernardin, a life Samuel had promised but never delivered. Instead, she faced humiliations, loneliness, and the certainty that she would never belong to that world. Still, Anne clung to her ambition, convinced that Ryan would be her redemption, a safe return to what was familiar, where she could plan her next move. Arriving in Stamford, the sky was heavy with dark clouds mirroring the weight in her chest. The city seemed smaller, with its modest storefronts at Stamford Town Center and the quiet murmur of Long Island Sound in the distance. Anne rented a temporary room at the Hotel 0 Degrees, a place elegant enough for her vanity, while she planned her next step. Sitting on the bed, phone in hand, she rehearsed the message to Ryan. "Ryan, I'm back in Stamford. Can we talk? I want to see you at Terrain Cafe tomorrow, 4 p.m. She hesitated, picturing his smile as he read it, certain he would rush to her. She sent the message, and to her surprise, Ryan replied within minutes. "Okay, I'll be there." The tone was curt, but Anne ignored it, convinced her charm would make him yield. The next day, Anne spent the morning getting ready with care. She chose a navy blue dress that flattered her figure, heels that echoed her ambition, and flawless makeup to hide the sleepless nights. The Terrain Cafe on Greenwich Avenue was a cozy space, with rustic wooden tables, hanging plants, and the aroma of artisanal coffee. Anne arrived early, choosing a table by the window where soft light illuminated her face. As she waited, memories of Ryan flooded her mind. The night she ended things with him at her Springdale apartment, the pained look he tried to hide, the bag of food from Zodi's 19th hole he left on the table. She pushed the guilt aside, focusing on the plan. She would say she made a mistake, that New York made her realize how much she loved him. Ryan, she believed, would forgive everything. When Ryan walked in at 4 o'clock sharp, Anne's heart raced. He looked different, taller it seemed, in a well-tailored suit and with a confidence she didn't recognize. His blonde hair was swept back, and his eyes, once so open to her, now seemed wary. He sat down, ordering a black coffee from the waiter before facing her. "You're back," he said, without emotion. Anne forced a smile, leaning forward. "Ryan, I made a mistake." New York wasn't what I thought. I realized what really matters is what we had. The words came out rehearsed, but she believed them, at least in that moment. Ryan watched her in silence, his face impassive. You ended things with me at your apartment, Anne. You said you needed to find yourself. But I know the truth. You went to live with another guy, didn't you? The accusation caught her off guard, and Anne felt her face burn. It's not like that. I was confused, she stammered, but Ryan raised a hand, cutting her off. Don't lie. I know everything. Stamford's small, Anne, people talk. His tone was calm but sharp, and Anne realized with a jolt that he wasn't there to forgive her. He leaned back in his chair, taking a sip of coffee. I've moved on, Anne. I met someone. She's amazing and we're happy. Besides, things have changed for me. I'm CEO of the company now. Things are going well. The words were like a knife. Anne had pictured Ryan waiting for her, stuck in the past, but here he was, successful, confident, with a new life. You're with someone else? She asked, her voice faltering. Ryan nodded, not breaking eye contact. Yes, and she loves me for real, not as a backup plan. Pain settled in Anne's chest, mingled with memories of the past. She remembered the picnic at Cummings Park, when Ryan made her laugh with a silly story about his boss. She recalled how he held her, the promise of a simple but true future. And then, the image of the day she left him, with the food bag on the table and the door closing behind him, returned like a crushing weight. I'm so sorry, Ryan, she whispered, her eyes welling up. I realized too late what I threw away. Ryan looked at her for a moment, with a mix of pity and distance. Sometimes, Anne, we only value things when we lose them. I hope you find what you're looking for. He stood, left money on the table for the coffee, and walked out of the Terrain Cafe without looking back. Anne sat there motionless as tears streamed silently. For the first time, she understood that Ryan was gone forever. Her ambition, which had driven her to New York and Samuel, had left her with nothing but regrets. Looking out the window, where Stamford seemed small and indifferent, Anne felt the emptiness of her choices. The future, once so bright, was now uncertain. She grabbed her bag, wiped her face, and left the cafe, knowing she had to face what came next, but without the certainty of finding redemption. The streets of Stamford, Connecticut felt quieter to Anne Sullivan, as if the city, once familiar, now judged her in silence. After the devastating encounter with Ryan Mitchell at the Terrain Cafe, Anne carried an emptiness no ambition could fill. Her return to Stamford, planned as a strategic retreat, had become a brutal fall. Alone, without the glamour of New York or the comfort of true love, she faced the consequences of her choices. In the small apartment she rented in Springdale, with white walls and cheap furniture, Anne spent her nights staring at the ceiling, tormented by the certainty that she had thrown away what mattered most, a man who loved her unconditionally. Stamford, with its shops at the town center and the murmur of Long Island Sound, seemed to hum with echoes of Ryan's success. One morning, while buying coffee at the Starbucks on Atlantic Street, Anne overheard two women in line talking about him. Did you see Ryan Mitchell on the cover of the Stamford Advocate? He's CEO now, opened a new branch of the company, one said, proud as if she knew him personally. And that girlfriend of his, so sweet, they're getting married, I hear, the other added. Anne looked down, pretending to fiddle with her phone, but the words cut like blades. Ryan was no longer the simple man she had known. He was a prominent figure, respected, while she was merely a shadow of her own ambitions. The city wouldn't let her forget. At the Fairway Market, an old high school classmate recognized her. Anne Sullivan? I thought you were living large. In New York, he said, with a curious smile. Anne forced a wave, mumbling something about being back. You heard about Ryan, right? Guy's flying high. Good person, always was, he added, oblivious to the impact. Each comment was a reminder of what she had lost. Not just Ryan, but the chance at a life anchored in something real. Anne, who had always dreamed of the spotlight, now found herself faded, a stranger in the town she once called home. In her apartment, the loneliness was suffocating. Anne avoided social media, knowing that seeing pictures of Ryan, perhaps with his new girlfriend, smiling at events or on trips, would be unbearable. Instead, she sorted through her belongings, finding relics of the past, a photo of her and Ryan at Cummings Park, him laughing with melting ice cream in his hand, a cheap bracelet he gave her in their first month of dating. Sitting on the floor holding the bracelet, Anne realized with painful clarity that she had never loved Ryan the way he loved her. She saw him as safe, predictable, an obstacle to her dreams of grandeur. While he offered devotion, she chased status, trading a loyal heart for the empty promises of Samuel Brooks. Guilt consumed her, but there was no one to confess to. Her few remaining friends in Stamford had drifted away, perhaps envious of her escape to New York, perhaps sensing her greed. Anne tried to rebuild her life, sending resumes to fashion companies in Connecticut, but responses were scarce. Her experience as a saleswoman in Stamford and the lost year in New York didn't impress. At night, she wandered the streets, passing the Avon Theater or Bedford Street where couples strolled hand in hand. The sight made her think of Ryan, how he always held her hand firmly, promising to be by her side. Now no one was waiting for her. One afternoon, driven by an impulse, Anne drove to Stamford's harbor where Long Island Sound stretched beneath a late autumn sky. The salty air mingled with the smell of seaweed, and boats bobbed gently at the piers. She walked to the end of a dock, the wind mussing her hair, and sat down gazing at the horizon. The sea, vast and indifferent, seemed to reflect her insignificance. There, alone, Anne let the tears fall, no longer held back by a facade of strength. She thought of Ryan, the way he looked at her, as if she were his world. She thought of Samuel, the promises of a life that never existed. And she thought of herself, the greed that blinded her to what truly mattered, a true love, someone who would always be by her side. "I threw it all away," she whispered, her voice swallowed by the sound of the waves. The image of Ryan at the Terrain Cafe, confident and distant, returned like a weight. He had found happiness while she reaped the bitterness of her choices. Anne realized that her pursuit of status had left her empty, without love, without purpose. The harbor, with its boats coming and going, seemed to mock her inability to navigate her own life. She hugged her knees, feeling the chill of the dock, and promised herself she would change, though she didn't know how. But the promise was fragile, drowned by the regret that now defined her existence. As she left the harbor, the sun setting behind her, Anne walked back to her apartment. Her steps heavy. Stamford, with its soft lights and quiet routine, offered no answers. The lesson was clear but cruel. Genuine love, the kind Ryan had offered, was rare, a treasure she had scorned for ambition. Prioritizing herself above true feelings had led to loneliness. That night, lying in bed, Anne looked at Ryan's bracelet still on her nightstand. There was no going back, but the memory of that lost love would be her punishment, and perhaps her only chance to learn. The future was uncertain, but one truth remained: without true love, no achievement was worth it. Let's talk about it. What did you think of Anne's story? Would you forgive her if you were Ryan? Could you return to someone who broke your heart? Do you think Anne deserved her lonely fate? Or is there hope for her redemption? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone and can't wait to hear your take. Share this video with friends who love a good story, and let's spark a conversation. Don't miss this captivating tale of love and regret. If you love dramatic stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join our storytelling community.